Hey everybody, welcome to Watches with Dennis, and it's Saturday, so we've got a Saturday live stream. Got a couple of topics for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about some special edition Seiko Prospex dive watches that came out that we had a little bit of discussion on in the Discord channel for the YouTube channel, which incidentally, in the video description, down below the image somewhere should be a link to that Discord. There's no cost. Feel free to join. We have a lot of conversations about articles and things, and I use that a lot to solicit ideas on things that I should cover on the live streams. And we will also talk a little bit about Nomos. They have a new version of the Club Sport Neomatik, a new size and some new dial configurations. I think the size is new, and some new dial configurations with that. So we'll go ahead and dive a little bit into Germany. We're sort of staying away from the Swiss today, or at least in the two topics I have planned. And then other than that, we will just go where the winds will take us, or more specifically, where the watches will take us, because those who are watching live might have some thoughts on things they would like to discuss. So we will play all of that by ear. But let's see, other than the Discord channel, which I just plugged, as a reminder, you can always support the channel further. Watching is the best way. Liking this, of course, helps other people find it, though most people are probably busy doing like fun Saturday things, not watching me talk live. But always like the video, and down below there is a link to the 99 Cent Club if you want to support even further. So that being said, I almost, for the Seiko topic, did a pre-recorded video. I normally would have, but unfortunately I had 2 after-hours meetings this week at work, and so I just had no energy for it, and I thought, well, it'll work well enough as a live stream. But I know there's a lot of interest in Seiko, so normally I do try and put together a first thoughts in that regard. But before going let me say good morning to Neff, who has said hello in the chat. Welcome to the live stream. Of course, Kevin. Welcome, Kevin. Hope things are going well out in Florida. And Ken, one of the 99 Cent Club members, says good morning. Nothing fun is this is it. Well, if I'm the best that you've got, then you can enjoy this with your Cocoa Puffs, or out in the East Coast, you guys are probably past your breakfast period at this stage. And Underhay, welcome to the live stream. So let's go ahead and get things going. Watch today, because I don't do this on the pre-recorded. Mosier Center Seconds Pioneer. I actually tried to wear this yesterday, but I'll bring this up before I jump into the channel. So, but I'm wearing a lot of dress shirts now, and I thought, let me try it. But with the domed sapphire, I could barely squeeze my cuff over the watch. So I changed watches really quick because we had a big old meeting with all of the staff. But here's the problem. So I've made a rule that I will not acquire any more dress watches in 2023. However, I think Tony in the live stream chat last week had pointed out speculation that I would probably be wearing dress watches a lot more after starting the new job, because I don't work from home anymore. And that is true, because I almost always am in a dress shirt every day now. I don't always wear a tie, but I'm almost always in a dress shirt. And so it started to be like, well, I could wear more dress watches because I have 2 and I've already been wearing them. So because of that, I'm starting to think, you know what? Guys, I got to stick with the rule. Okay. I'm not getting another dress watch in 2023. But 2024 is only a few months away. So I have started, taking new ideas of things. But for the time being, I should just enjoy the watches that I have. I very much believe. DeRosa, welcome to the live stream. Vancouver. That's right. You are one of the Canadian viewers. I don't know if I have any other Canadians in right now. Of course, sometimes I bring Canadians on the panels when I do the live panels. Neff says, you need a bespoke shirt with a larger left cuff. Someone should make that. Now, if I wore French cuff shirts, and I actually have a few in the closet, but if I wore French cuff shirts, I bet it's not a problem. Here's the thing. I actually never wear my French cuff shirts. I'll probably give them away to Goodwill or something, because I find cufflinks exceedingly pretentious. And so I don't ever wear French cuff shirts. I think they're way too, I don't know, whatever. Pretentious is the word I use. And I stole that from a TV show where Edward James Olmos was playing a judge, and that was the whole court case hinged on the fact that his cufflink was found there, but he didn't wear French cuff shirts because they were pretentious. And I found that even though I ended up with a couple of pairs of such shirts, I never wear them. I have 1 pair of cufflinks. I never use them. I only want button cuffs. So just one of those things. But I bet that would, but I'm sure a bespoke solution would work with getting a button cuff that could actually accommodate a giant Moser sports watch. But I think it's just easier to like pull out a reverso instead and not suffer with that suffer with that struggle. Koji, welcome to the live stream and another 99 Cent Club member. Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Or you wear your watch over the cuff, a la Gianni Agnelli. I'm sure I missaid that. What is that last name? Agnelli? Is that a musician or something? I don't know the name. All right. Yes, I could do this. Or like the old recon watches of the Luftwaffe did at the time. Like those 55mm watches were worn over the bombardier jackets. But so yes, I could do that, but I think it would be a little too weird for the Midwest. I'm not sure. I have a pair of Grand Seiko cufflinks. Do I win the pretentious award of the year? No, there are things far more pretentious than cufflinks. It's just we all make our own little weird. Like most of my clothes are super cheap. Like I don't wear a lot of fancy. So like all the money went into the watches. Everything else is just like Dockers and stuff. I don't. It's just not my thing. So more power to people who love those. But maybe really elaborate tie clips. Maybe that's more pretentious. I don't know. I have anything against a tie clip, but I don't own any. I'm trying to think what other things. Certain vehicles, but you don't wear those. They wear you, I guess. I don't know. It's an interesting thought. But what isn't an interesting thought is Seiko, because they do a lot of recon. That was a terrible segue, but I work with what I've got. So here's a link, and the two articles I'll be using to drive the conversation today, as usual, are in the video description. So feel free to go and actually read those to your heart's content when you feel like it. But so this is a blog to watch. Several sites, of course, covered this. Prospex US Special Edition dive watches caught my eye. One, because I actually like a lot of the look of a lot of Seiko watches just in general. Plus, I own one Seiko. It is a Prospex, and it was also a US Special Edition. Now, not this format. Mine is in the turtle configuration. But so these came out, and of course, it's Seiko. It had to be limited editions, right? We got to have a limited edition. So well, I think they ended up dropping 3 limited editions. So these are all US versions. I guess according to the article, it's a reinterpretation. I do not know Seiko models at all. So like I might be able to throw some of the slang around like turtle, monster, samurai. I know some of the nicknames of the broad model lines. And I'm familiar with like Seiko 5 and Prospex and stuff. So I understand like Prospex is the professional specification watch line, but like these are all interpretations of the 62 Moss. And I don't know anything about what the Seiko 62 Moss is. But so they've come out with these, got a variety of looks. I think we can get zoom ins on this. I think they're very attractive watches. We kind of got a gradient effect here on the blue, light to dark, not all the way black or to the edge on that one. This one seems a little less gradient and more just they're all textured, incidentally. I guess that's why there's ice behind it. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be, is a texturing like ice. Here's another where I think you see the gradient a lot better. Of course, I love gray. So, so yeah, date window at the 3 o'clock, no day indication on these. And these use this 6R movement, not the 4R, like the 4R36, which is in the lower end watch. Like the one I have has a 4R36. It's a king turtle in the sense that it had a ceramic bezel insert, and because regular turtles don't. And regular turtles tend to have their hard lex, and the king turtles have sapphire. But I still had the lower end movement, as per Seiko's marketing, as per their approach, and as per their pricing. So you see all of these, and they're all inspired by whatever. They're stainless steel watches, 40 millimeters in diameter, technically 40.5, 13.2 millimeters thick, so quite reasonable for a dive watch, I would say. And then the 200 meters water resistance, which is pretty standard for Seiko's Prospex line in my experience. But price point, because they're running the 6R35, which is still a 3 hertz movement like the 4R36 is, but 70 hours of power reserve, supposed to be more accurate. On paper, like from the factory, yes, but it's not a highly accurate movement. I don't know if the specifications of the accuracy are listed here. Probably not. But the price point, $1,250, is not insignificant for a Seiko. And in fact, I wanted to ask, I thought about playing a game, but of course I'd be stealing that straight from a blog to watch of guess the price of the Seiko. So I have just fired up a poll. I was going to launch it a little bit ago, but I'm like, let's do it now. Why not now? And so I want to know, like, from you all, what price point do you guys think Seiko should be operating at? Because uh, it's all over the place now. I mean, they basically, I there's no rhyme or reason to it, which is why guess the price of the Seiko works as a game so well, because you can't. The biggest predictor to price is the movement, but there's still a lot of range within each of those. So for those that aren't familiar, basically Seiko movements fall into three mechanical tiers. You got the 4R movements, which are on the lowest end watch pricing. Like the Seiko 5s, like all use that. Then you've got the six movement, the 6R movements, which are supposed to be more accurate, and then the watches are more expensive. And then they have the 8Rs, which are the most expensive and supposedly the most accurate. Now, I can't speak much to the 8Rs because I don't really know anything about them. But the thing is, at $1,250, like we're getting into the price point where you can find gray market Tudor 1926s, which use Solitas, modified Solitas, but they're regulated to COSC standard. The 6R line isn't COSC standard. It's not even close to six. It's not even close to a COSC certified standard. And I'd love to know from any of you, well, if you're watching the recording, feel free to leave a comment, but if you're watching live, if you've had experience, because I just don't have much experience with Seiko, with the 6R movements. I've had people comment on my videos about Seiko in the past who have complained, like they don't like's not the right word. They don't agree with when I describe the 6R as a superior movement to the 4R. The general response when I've had one has been, on paper, the 6R is more accurate. However, it's still really inaccurate. A lot of people complain about mechanical issues with the 6Rs, and the 4Rs are more robust. Therefore, the 4R is actually a better movement to get out of Seiko because you're not really getting anything meaningful other than a bigger bill from Seiko to buy the watch when it comes with the 6R movement. But I'd love to know any of you who have, like, because I like in some ways I get it. Maybe power reserve aside, maybe you don't really care if it's an automatic watch. Like these are all automatics. I'm not sure. So anyway, I thought I'd float that out there. But let me catch up on chat. I do see there were a few comments while you all noodle on that and vote in the poll, of course. Koji says, I'm a concert pianist. That's a pretentious way of saying I'm unemployed at the moment. Okay. Well, I had a story time with Dennis. I had a roommate my first year in college, and actually later in life was a housemate here. I rented a room to him in my house. He now lives, I think, in North Carolina. But he majored in trombone, not in music theory, but actually playing the trombone. And that is not his career. That is not his career. He might still do, like, I don't know if he's playing with any of the orchestras, like part-time out in that area or not, but he ended up selling cars was what he was doing when he moved out there. He was a car salesman here in Kansas City before he moved out there to sell cars. And then I think he got out of that. And I think his main income source is actually like doing Uber at this point, but very good trombone player. Or I would assume, I don't know. I went to high school with him too. And he was like the best trombone player. Actually, he was the best. Like they had all these rankings and stuff in the band. And he was like on all the boards. He was like, music was everything to him. But I didn't know anything. All I knew was, like, because we were in the same room, like he liked to listen to classical music to fall asleep, which was fine with me because he would fall asleep with like in 10 minutes. And then I like it silent. So I would just turn it off after he fell asleep and then I could fall asleep. So anyway, that was his, he was our best tromboner, the number one tromboner, maybe in the history of the school, the best tromboner. I don't know. I don't know how many people focus on the trombone. Neff says the lighter blue is nice. I agree with you, Neff. This darker blue one is probably my least favorite. I do like the gray, but there are other gray watches that click with me a bit better than this. And so I do like this light blue. It'd probably be my favorite as well. Don't love the lack of the color match date window. It's okay. But I mean, I think it would look better if the lume pips were like the filled in indices with the loom were wider. Like sometimes when you do the non-color match date window, if you can make like how white these markers are, if you can make the date windows backdrop the same white as the indices, I think it integrates better because this is basically sticking out as far as the 9 o'clock indices. So that you see, this is the indices with the loom looks more cream colored than like the stark white that the date window is. And yeah, it's the same white as in the bezel and it's the same white as in the minute markers, but that's not what it's abutting. It's abutting the limited loomed 3 o'clock marker, and it's not the same shade. So don't love it, especially for over $1,000. But hey, they're not the only watch brand that I have an Oris, which they went with black with the gray dial version, but the Oris Pro Pilot X's don't have color match date windows, and those are like $3,000 watches retail. So you know, it's just one of those things where I might whine about it more so than someone else would. But I like the hand shape and stuff. And the indices are okay. I don't like, it's not my favorite configuration, these rectangles, but it's okay. It works for what it is. Ken says, is Seiko cannibalizing Grand Seiko with these? I don't think so. Not at 1200, not at 1250. Now, let's see. Are these limited or are these, I think these are, I don't think these are limited edition. I think these are like the King Seiko I have, the King Turtle, I should say. I don't own a King Seiko. Talk about an overpriced watch. I think it's just limited to the US market. So it's like JDM watches where you can order the Japanese watches and get them here. And I'm sure the Japanese who want to get these are able to go to a US site and get a purchase done. It's not like a big deal. But 1250, I don't think this cannibalizes Grand Seiko. It's too cheap to cannibalize Grand Seiko. The 8R movements, that's where I think there's a serious risk to Grand Seiko's sales. But that's just my take on it. I see Koji says, I think that's an issue overall, Ken. You have Seiko, King Seiko, Grand Seiko, Creedor, probably too confusing and seems unfocused even for watch geeks. Ken also comments, I may take a more expensive Seiko rather than a Grand Seiko. The issue with Grand Seiko is folks think is just Seiko. End of the day, so why not just go with Seiko? And Neff thinks the end links just look off to me, not well integrated. And we have a nice little view of the 6 o'clock end link, so you can, yeah, I mean, it looks a little loose, not as tightly fit as one might. But again, at this price point, I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be better than what it's at. Now, let's, I think, talk a little bit about this. And I think I'll throw back up Koji's comment because that's the sort of route. So, well, Ken asked about is Seiko cannibalizing Grand Seiko. I wouldn't say with this model in particular, but of course, that's a very good question about just like in general, the Seiko strategy, because I don't understand what the Seiko strategy is. I don't know if Seiko knows what the Seiko strategy is, but they are in, and that's part of the reason for the poll that I have up. They are in a lot of pies right now, like their fingers and there are pies, and the pies are different flavors. You know, we got the apple pie, we got the pumpkin pie, we got a pecan pie or pecan, depending how you like to pronounce it. French silk pie might be up in there. And then maybe some weird pie like strawberry rhubarb. Okay, that's a big spectrum of flavor. And in this case, in this analogy, the spectrum is price, and Seiko is all across the board. Now, they're not the only brand that does this, right? Omega has a really shockingly broad price spectrum, but you know, like the really, really high-end stuff out of Omega, like that's not the normal, that's just weird, like special stuff, you know, like that. The chrono chime thing they did, that's not for normal Omega buyers. That's for people that follow Omega and just want something just really cool and weird, and they buy grand complications. Like Omega likes to show it can do a grand complication, but they know that's not where they make their money. With Seiko, you've got all the way, I'm trying to do it through the way my screen is for you guys. So you've got like Seiko 5, right? Lamented in some cases, replacement to the SKX line. 100 meters of water resistance, though. Robust, hardy, 4R movement watches. A lot of people getting into watches can still find a lot of those for under 200 at least. Then we jump up a tier and you start getting into stuff like, and I'll put it back up on the screen. We start getting into stuff like this. So 6R movements, maybe, 4R to 6R. There's a transition. The Prospex line, really, though, right? So this is stuff designed to be used. So this is where you start getting where people are like, this is what you used to get with the SKX, but you get this 200 meters of water resistance. You stick with a 4-hour movement. You start talking about watches that are kind of like in the 500 to under $1,000 range, or we go 6R like with this watch, and now we're getting up into the $1,200 range. And then, we start seeing more and more jumps like King Seiko coming in way up at the end, where you might still have 6-hour movements, but they're all of a sudden around like $3,000, if I remember correctly. So, and then there's the 8R stuff, which some of that stuff that Seiko proper is putting out is coming in within $500 of Grand Seiko watches. So it's definitely a cannibalizing issue in general with Seiko versus Grand Seiko. Now, what I think in regards to this comment that Ken has about like making the choice between a Seiko than a Grand Seiko, I do think they being Grand Seiko has done a lot better now that Grand Seiko is a separate subsidiary. It doesn't say Seiko at the like here on this watch. It doesn't say Seiko at the top anymore, and then Grand Seiko at the bottom. On the Grand Seiko watches, it says Grand Seiko up top, and then they'll have their specifications and stuff. Now, it's not perfect, right? Because we saw this in video games with Nintendo, where they had the Wii, and then they launched a new console. Do you remember? It wasn't the Switch. It was the Wii U. And then everyone was confused. It's like, well, what is this? Is this like just a new slim version of the Wii, or what is that? Like, the name was too similar. And I think Seiko naming Grand Seiko was never a great idea. Of course, when they launched it, it was a different time, and there was a different thought process. Creedor works as a name. You don't think Seiko when you hear Creedor. Grand Seiko will always be haunted by the name Seiko because Seiko's still in the name, but now that it's run independently, I think they're starting to be able to create a lot of space. Whereas like King Seiko is like, it's still under Seiko proper. So it's like, what are you doing? Why don't you spin this off? Instead, it just seems like overpriced versions of, I love the design language of the King Seiko, but it just feels really, really overpriced because it's just another 6-hour movement watch like this, except for some reason I have to pay like almost $2,000 more than this thing. And I think this thing's a little expensive for what it is. So it's tough. It's tough. But they've made inroads mostly with enthusiasts to understand that Grand Seiko is different. The hand finishing, they're able to point out but that's a clear demarcation. Like Grand Seiko doesn't have the Grand Seiko 5 at the end of the low end of the spectrum. So they're not haunted by that and having to deal with that sort of baggage that comes along with something along those lines. So anyway, I think it's interesting. These watches they're all right. I just don't like, if you like them, you like them. I know a lot of people collect Seiko. And I'm sure some of them are getting frustrated because it's gotten more and more difficult to collect Seiko affordably. And that was probably part of the attraction why a lot of people got into, like, I know people with more money who collect Rolexes. Now me, like, mentally, I don't understand either well, I guess I do. Like, I'm not either one of those collectors. I understand where they're coming from, and the strategies behind both are actually different, even though in some ways they're the same. They're the same in the sense that, to me, I find it odd to just collect one brand because it seems like you are deliberately shutting yourself off from enjoying other types of watches almost instinctively, because I don't know a lot of people that go, oh yeah, no, I used to collect a lot of different watches and then I just decided to go straight into exclusively Seiko. Like, I don't know people like that. But what I do end up seeing is that, like, there's a logic behind, but even there's a strategic lot. Like, so for the Seiko collector, like I mentioned those nicknames earlier, like Samurai, Monster, Turtle, all the rest of it, like, they do look quite a bit different. So you could collect Seiko and have a big variety of design aesthetic. I mean, it's just, they make a lot of watches and they look a lot different from each other. So I could see that. With Rolex, I don't. With Rolex, though, it's just, and it's unfair of me, but my gut instinct when I see someone who has like a collection of 12 Rolexes is, oh, you're really afraid about losing money in this hobby. So you're just playing it super safe. Because to me, that oyster case stands out, and I love the oyster case and it feels great, and they all look alike. So I'm just like, I don't understand the point of owning an Explorer 2, a Submariner, a GMT Master 2. It's like, in a lot of those instances, like, and date, you get a date just a oyster pressure. Like, a lot of times you're still having the same complications too. Now, when you look at the dial, you can start going, oh yeah, no, a Sky Dweller gives you something different than a Daytona, which gives you something different than a GMT Master 2. But I don't know why you don't an Explorer 2 and a GMT Master 2. I just don't get it. But it is what it is. Everyone's got their own taste. There's no right or wrong way. It's just, that's why I don't do that. It's the same reason why I wouldn't want to collect all the pilot watches of IWC. It's just, they all kind of look alike to me. But having one makes sense to me. It's just one of those fun things. But Neff says, if it's this complicated for season watch collectors, imagine being a casual buyer and trying to figure out why one Seiko costs $3,000 more than another. No, they can't. In fact, the season collectors, like, we could talk a little bit about, and the best I could give you is that unification of movement, but it doesn't even cover it all. Like, again, the 6R range is all over the place on price. Yeah, you won't find a 6R watch under $200 from Seiko new in box, but why is it like you find them at around $1,000, but then you find them also at around $3,000? That, it's really weird. It's really weird. No logic to it. No logic to it. I don't even think Seiko knows how they're picking their prices. I really don't. If I was an interviewer and did a lot of interviews, I would love to have someone on who makes the pricing decisions from Seiko, just to have a conversation like, what is the logic? Because at least with the other brands, even if we object to where they're pricing things, usually it makes sense. I can't make sense out of Seiko's pricing. Grand Seiko kind of makes sense. Seiko proper, I can't do it. Ken says it's too nuanced, and like you said, Dennis, the name of the brand supersedes all. Yes, and that is a tough bet. Like, I still think, even with all the work they've done, the smartest move Grand Seiko could ever do is rename themselves. And I'm sure they think that's a bad idea. They're going to have to rebuild all that brand equity, get people to understand the new name. You know what? Long term, I still think it's a smarter play, but they won't do it. They won't, but they were smart when they named Creedor, so that solved that problem. Ken says, won't ever see Tudor being renamed as Rolex, named Rolex Junior. Exactly, and they're probably now in the enthusiast space. I mean, we disproportionately talk about Tudor versus how good their sales are, and there are a lot of people that will go into Tudor because they want something from Rolex, and either they can't get it, can't afford it, or Rolex won't do the design. Like, they won't do the design risk. It's funny to talk about Tudor as a risky company because they really aren't, but they do more risk taking than Rolex does. Kind of like, it's not surprising to see Tudor play in titanium first, and then finally we see a Yachtmaster come out after we see a super deep sea thing in Rolex's catalog with titanium. But you know, it's like, you like titanium and Rolex isn't doing anything in it. Tudor gives you an opportunity to have something, and the design aesthetic it's different than Rolex, but kind of feels like Rolex. But I think there are probably a lot of people, not a ton, because where Tudor is in the ranking sales wise is well beneath a number of other brand names, but they do have, they have their own fans, right? There are people who just like Tudors. And actually, as a bang for buck luxury watch brand, they're pretty good bang for buck. Like, I think you get a lot of watch for Tudor's pricing compared to like the price spikes Richemont did to a bunch of their catalog. And obviously, when you move up into Rolex, it's a significant. I mean, you're starting at like $7,000 at this stage, for the larger Oyster Perpetual. So it's just one of those things. But so you start to ask yourself, like with 8R movement Seikos, do you want one of those, or you want to start looking at some of the Tudor sports watches because they're kind of the same price? At least with Grand Seiko, you can point to a bunch of the hand finishing or something. You know, there's something to latch onto. And maybe they're doing some hand finishing on some of the 8R movement powered Seikos. I don't know. Seiko's got so many watches in the lineup. I can't keep it all straight. I just don't know what they're doing. But DeRosa says a lot of collectors basically buy the same thing a lot of different ways. It happens in most hobbies. Yeah, and I've been guilty of it too. I mean, that's why I had to set a rule for myself that I thankfully haven't broken yet. But you don't be surprised if I pull a hypocrisy on myself and do it, of limiting myself to 2 watches from a single brand at a time. which right now the only brand I have 2 watches from is Mr. Jones watches, but it was to make sure I don't get in that rut. There was a time in pinball where, and I can only, like, my game room has room for all it is pinball. So I have a long room and it's 7 machines. I own 8 because I have one in the garage. But at one point, I think I was up to 3 games from the same designer. And pinball is a lot smaller hobby than watches. I shouldn't have to have 3, but it's still got a lot of games over the decades. I mean, I've owned games as old as the 1950s. So there's no excuse for me to have 3 games from the same designer. So I finally got that slimmed down where I don't think I have more than one from, maybe I have 2 from one designer or something, but I don't think so. I think I got it slimmed down, but I had to force myself to do it, and try other stuff and be like, why am I doing this? Why am I not giving myself a variety? We also have to remember that a lot of people who go and buy a watch, be it a Tudor, a Seiko, a Rolex, or whatnot, buy one watch. And maybe eventually they get another watch, but they don't collect them. So, like, they don't think about it the same way. They'll be like, whoa, this Pelagos is really cool. Or, whoa, this US market 62 Moss inspired Seiko special edition Prospex is really cool. And they get that watch. And that's the watch that they keep until they get another one as a gift, or this one needs servicing and they swap, they get another watch well, that's when I got back into watches. Was my Explorer 2 needed a service. And I thought I should probably get another watch. It has been like 13 years. And then, oops, mistakes were made. But here we are. All we can do is live with our mistakes. Ken says, you can't port over new pinball games into the same machine, unlike arcade cabinet where you can mix and match. Yeah, it is possible. There, basically, no, you can't. There were some companies where if you have the same board set, you could in theory swap chips, but you still have to drop the whole play field in and all of that. They weren't designed that way. There were a couple companies. This all kind of ended in the 1980s though, because it just didn't make money, where operators could buy a kit and convert their old game to a new game and basically have new art and stuff. This was before the rules and the screens started to integrate stuff specific to the game into them. So this is one of those. So yeah, there's some stuff. There's a company that makes a kind of quasi virtual. You play like 2/3 of the game on a motion detecting 1080p screen, and then there's a module that you can plug in the back. It's Multimorphic is the name of the company that does this. Not had a lot of commercial success with it, in my opinion, but that was an idea to buy one system and then you drop in new modules. The problem is, unless you're a big established name, like they only have one licensed title, and that company has been making this thing for like 7 years. So, whereas if you want to go to like Stern Pinball, which is 80+% of the market, like all they do is license stuff. Like they just put out a pinball machine based off of the Marvel anti-hero Venom. And before that was a game based off of James Bond. And before that, or between those two, was Foo Fighters, the band. And then before that, they had, they've done all sorts of stuff recently, Deadpool and Mandalorian and Godzilla. And it's like everyone knows those things. No one knows Rocks or Heist sort of thing. So theme, but that's kind of back to your comment, Ken, with watches and Seiko and Grand Seiko and how important the name is. In pinball, works the same way, except it's not the name of the company that matters. It's whether or not it's a licensed theme. Licensed themes automatically sell games. Unlicensed themes, this ain't the arcade era anymore. Unlicensed themes don't move unless the person plays the game and loves it. People will buy Venom without playing it if they love Venom. It's just how it works. So like if you're a Star Wars collector, you'll buy a Star Wars pinball machine because it says Star Wars on it. Doesn't matter if the game's good. You'll buy it because of the theme. You might get rid of it if the game is crap, but theme is everything. DeRosa says, I'm in the bicycle business, and it's very common that people don't consider variety. They get stuck on small variants over and over. See, I only own, like, I have some, oh my gosh, I just went to a bike shop. This was years ago. I have thought about buying a new bike because I think it's just because I'm out of shape and I bike like every other year. And this was not the year I biked. I have a Gary Fisher, I think is the name of the bike, but brand of the bike. But, I'm like, oh, maybe I should get one that's actually like carbon fiber or titanium or something. So it's lighter because I'm getting winded on hills. But I think maybe I should have just biked more. Well, it might have been the answer. But I never really thought about people buying more and more bikes, but I guess it makes sense. And actually, there's a area pinball player, and I think he does own multiple bikes. And I have an uncle who retired. I mean, as old as I am, long retired at this stage, but I think he's got these 5-figure bikes, and does, like, when the Tour de France bikes, he bikes the same distances around out, and I don't know, I guess it's a thing bikers do or cyclists do and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting. Such interesting niches that and yeah, like akin to what Ken had said. It's like some people with cars, they like, yeah, I own a Toyota Corolla for point A to point B. Like, obviously, getting into watches and movements and stuff and pinball mechanics, I could totally have seen myself falling down the rabbit hole of being a gearhead and wanting a bunch of cars. The thing with cars is, even versus pinball machines, is the sizes start to really limit you unless you've got a lot of land, a lot of land or a garage or something. There's logistical barriers. And that was the problem with watches. It's so easy to have watches. They fit everywhere. You can live in a studio apartment and be a watch collector with very little inconvenience to your living space. Not true with so many of these other things. Same with like comic books. Pretty easy to store comic books. I don't collect comic books, but I know people. David Dennis, who's been on, he's a Canadian who's been on the live streams I do several times. He collects comics. So in addition to watches. So just one of those things. And let's see. DeRosa says, I met collectors, like people who own 50 road bikes from the same brand. See, I didn't know it was. I'm not surprised it's a thing, but I had no idea that it was. So let us go ahead. Well, let me end the poll and see what you guys all said. So what does this poll say? I have to jump to a different screen to end it. And the poll results say, oh, there was a tie. Okay. 9 votes came in, and it was split 44% each on that Seiko should be pricing their watches under $500, or Seiko should be pricing themselves from $500 to $1,000. 11% of you said that Seiko should operate in the $1,000, $2,000 space, and none of you seem to think that the King Seiko pricing at the 2,000 plus price point made sense for the brand. I actually thought that a majority of you would pick the sub 500, even though that hasn't been true for quite a while. I just assumed there was a stereotype that Seiko should be operating in the lower space. They clearly, they still play in that space quite a bit. They make a lot of Seiko 5 watches. Obviously, I think given the conglomerate of Seiko, they've been willing to cede more and more of that space, in theory, to Orient. I don't think that's actually their strategy, though. I think that's a total guess, but with the smartwatch market being so big, with Apple being the largest watch manufacturer at this point, with them selling so many millions of, I pulled some stats from 2 years ago, I think. And I don't remember. I want to think the smartwatch market was something like 20 million units in a year. And over half of those were Apple. And then the Swiss watch market, luxury Swiss watch market, is not small. It's still millions. We know Rolex sells out basically ever. As far as the company's concerned, they sell them all to the dealers. So 1.2 million units right there. But anyway, back to the thing about Seiko. The problem is now, go to the end here, that lower end price point of basically smartwatch pricing down and up to that point. If smartwatches are seizing a lot of that, like, we're not into watches, but we need a watch sort of crowd, long term, where's the market? Because most of that's not collectors. It was historically, like when Casio was making bank, and Seiko and Citizen in that price tier, because people wanted a nice looking, affordable watch. If they're getting smartwatches now, moving up market makes sense, does it not? Because there's just not a market there anymore. That market is for a computer on the wrist. Luxury is totally different, because now we're all about getting a nice piece because we want a nice timepiece. So I don't think the low end goes away, but I think it becomes more and more collector driven, because there's no reason to alienate a lower end, lower budget collector. That's a real market, and there's a real value in my view, and from a company perspective, in exploiting it, because there's no reason. You can have a lot of really neat mechanical stuff going on at the lower price point, and people enjoy it, and you can have a lot of creativity there. Pinball, we lost that in pinball. New inbox pinball at the bottom end at this point is $7,000. Yeah, it caps out well cheaper than high-end watches do. Like most pinball machines come out in a range of $7,000 to $15,000 new inbox. That's the price point now. There's nothing affordable. Used, sure. But the idea of a company coming in, every time there's a new company that comes in, it comes in at over that $7,000 price point. There's one talking about doing an experiment a little bit lower, but every time I wonder that who's going to come in and try and make a $5,000 game, it doesn't happen. They just come in higher. So it's just a different environment. So, and Koji says, wow, bottom end pinball is 7,000. Yeah, MSRP. You might be able to find a little bit of discounting. And that's Stern Pinball. They do 3 tiers of everything. They always do a limited edition of a model that they come out with, usually around 1,000 units. They do a premium edition, which has all the features of the LE, usually a different art package, but it's full featured. And then a stripped down version with less moving mechanical toys. They call them the Pro model because they're more designed for arcades because there's less stuff that could break on them. And those are the cheapest. And almost everyone else prices, most pinball machines are in the $7,000 to $10,000 range. This was not true a few years ago. Pre-pandemic, that pricing was more around $5,000. It's come up a lot. And in part, that's because home collectors are the largest market share now. And besides Stern and those pros, not many people target arcade operators. Arcade operators are still a big player, but they used to be over, like when I got into the hobby, buying used games, they were like 70% of the market. They're maybe 30% now, much, much less. A lot of them died in COVID. Like the arcades just died. They couldn't survive. So they went away. DeRosa says, smartwatches are driving up mechanical watch prices. Tissot and Longines used to be large volume, many millions per year. Seiko is in a weird spot. Yeah, I think they're all trying to figure out a way to survive. And going to the collectors makes a lot of sense. The problem is collectors don't buy nearly as many watches as I think collectors think they do. But they have options. And that's the great thing about watches. And one of the things that I like about watches more than pinball is I wear a watch every day. I do not play pinball every day. I take a watch is practical. I take a watch with me. I constantly am checking a watch for the time. So not right now because I got a little time in the corner of my Windows computer. But after this, when I walk away, I'll be checking my watch. So now here's a brand. I actually like these. And so I wanted to talk about this one a little bit just because I can never get into Nomos. Nomos and their Bauhaus designs, Bauhaus inspired designs, have always been too Bauhaus for me. Like I can do like Bauhaus-esque like Calatrava, but most of the Nomos line, just like Young Hans, just generally, and we're talking like not all of Young Hans, obviously they do more than one type of watch, but the Max Bill style ones, just too Bauhaus for me. Like it doesn't click for me. These though, I actually like quite a bit. Now, these are what this is a Monochrome Watch article. Again, there's a link in the description down below this video, so you can go and read this. So these were they described this as autumn like fall colors, seasonal colors. I don't know if this 39 is a new shape, size. I thought it was, but so now Nomos has done 39 or done. I don't know if they've done 39 before. So this talked about they had a 35 millimeter. I think they still have it, the Tangente, which I've looked at before. These are actually 39.5 millimeters. Let's actually jump down to the specs. I know Monochrome puts them at the bottom, which is really helpful. So 39.5 millimeter case diameter, very thin, 8.4 millimeters. So that is, I think, a big win on these. And so, it's 8.4 millimeters with the case back, 8.5 with, okay, so it's still like, I don't know why they put two movement, like, who cares what the size is of the thickness without the sapphire? Who walks around with their watch not protected by the sapphire? It doesn't make any sense to me. Monochrome, why would you list that? Oh, come on, let's be reasonable. This incidentally has the same water resistance as the Seikos we just talked about, 200 meters. And it does have anti-reflective coating on the sapphire. I assume inside only. I hope so. I don't think Nomos is a brand that puts it on the outside like Omega does, which is an IWC, which I hate because you scratch it up. So they call these colors Tabak, which I'm probably saying wrong. I don't know that name. Ember or Smoke. I like all the colors though. It's powered by the DUW3001, which is their in-house Neomatik watch, 3 hertz movement, only 42 hours power reserve. The Seikos we talked about had clearly they don't look alike at all, but just for our comparison purposes, those were 70-hour power reserve watches. And these do come on steel bracelets and are priced, and the pricing here is in euros. Oh, I see what okay, I made a mistake, and my apologies to Monochrome. It's 8.5 millimeters if you go with the sapphire crystal caseback version, but they also have a closed caseback version, which is 1/10 of a millimeter thinner at 8.4. Okay. Because you can get the sapphire caseback version for 3,100 euros roughly, or for 2,800 euros, you can get it with a closed caseback if you don't want to look at the movement. So, and I actually do have two different movements. Okay. So we've got no, those are just reference numbers. Okay. I thought it said the same movements. So yeah, I like all three of these colors. I love radiant sunburst dials, and that's what all of these are. Gray, as you all know, those of you who've watched this channel ever probably know, I love gray dials. So of course I really love that one a lot. That's probably this one here is probably my least favorite shade, this more coffee mocha style shade. It still looks really good though. Love the small seconds. I love the slightly sunken small seconds register here at the 6 o'clock position. Really clean, bold Arabic numeral markers. I love Arabic markers. I think it looks really good in this format. I mean, what's the biggest thing I'm going to criticize? Probably the font of the Neomatik. I've never been a big fan of the labeling font that Nomos does in general. It's very modern, but yeah, I definitely own one of these. Like, I don't think I'm going to put it on my list per se, but if I did, I think I might do this one just because it's such a different color than something I already own. If I didn't own watches of the color already, I'd definitely go with this. I think this looks really sharp. But they all three look good. All right, there's a good shot of them all. So I actually like this a lot, and the pricing isn't too bad. Nomos used to be a really good bargain. I think they're still a pretty reasonable purchase. Again, I'll load the image up here in a moment, but okay, we're talking around 3,000 euros and dollars are relatively similar. So we're talking at around the $3,000 price point. So, but again, this is using their in-house movement. They had watches when they were more affordable. I think they still make a number of them that are Ebosh movements. So, there are options. I never have really clicked with their dial design, but here I think so. Here, if you wanted to see the movement, so if you get the sapphire one, you can enjoy that. I always thought, at least on the sapphire ones, I think they do I don't think they treat the closed ones differently. Well, maybe they do. I don't want to. I might be speaking out of turn. Actually, for a $3,000 watch, very reasonable amount of movement decoration. I think their movement decoration is a lot nicer than what we see out of Omega, and I think Omega's decent. Way better than Tudor, which just doesn't even do anything. Like Tudor looks like a Seiko 5. I still don't understand why Tudor puts anything with a display case back, given they take no effort into their move. I like their movements, but they're ugly, and that's fine. But you hide that. If your movement got hit with the ugly stick, hide it behind a closed case back. It's just logic. If we're spending multi-$1,000s, we don't need to just see the movement unless the movement looks good. There are plenty of low cost, approachable watches with a display case backs for people who just want to see a movement in general. We don't need to do it in the luxury space. Just my opinion. I know not everyone agrees, but anyway, I think these look really good. So I wanted to talk a little bit about them. Now, let me try and catch up with the chat because I do see that a number of you have said stuff. So let's see. Neff. We'll start with Neff. I like these Nomos. The middle and right one are really good looking. We'll go back to those. There we go. So you like the middle and right one. Those were my favorites too, Neff. We're watch buddies. Isn't that nice? I think that's nice. Okay. Koji says, I think these are still Bauhaus inspired. Definitely. I agree. That will appeal to more people. I think they've done Neomatik in 41 and 37. So this size will appeal to more people. Yes. With this watch shape, I would be okay with 37, like with these dial colors and all that. For me, but I think a lot more people would be more comfortable with 39, and 41 would, like, when you're getting a sort of almost Calatrava-esque look, I know 41 would fit, but to me, it's like, yeah, they're on bracelets, so they're meant to be sport. I I wouldn't say no to a 41. I had a Tudor 1926 at 39 and it wore really well. Obviously different brand, different watch style, but I think 39 is very, very smart. And let's not forget, a lot of people to this day lament Rolex getting out of making those 39 millimeter cases and making you pick either a smaller or a larger option. Gom, welcome to live stream, by the way. Glad you could join in. Says Seiko should fit in between the better AliExpress watches like San Martin and lower end Swiss like Christopher Ward. That actually makes a lot of sense. I hadn't really thought about it in that perspective, but I do think they could dominate very well with that. And maybe they're kind of trying to do that. I don't know. I said Gom. I should have said Gorn. Sorry, I clicked on the way this thing works. The colors all shifted. I could barely read the name. So apologies, Gorn. The yeah, I think maybe they're kind of trying. Obviously, they do have watches in that space. It's just they're also moving around a bit. Of course, Christopher Ward. Very good bang for buck brand, but their price spectrum is pretty broad too, right? Like they got watches under $1,000, but they also, like, if you start talking Bel Canto, aren't you up around 3 at that point? Again, everything has a range. So, and it wouldn't be fair of me to say, okay, Seiko, you need to, I don't know if I'd say it in that weird voice, but you need to stay in under 1,000, sort, and limit them that much. But I really struggle with Seiko going all the way up to 3,000. I think maybe Seiko operating in that like 200 to 2,000, I don't know. But yeah, kind of saying like strategically trying to position between two companies. I think that would make a lot of sense for them. I just don't, and I don't think they're doing that. I don't think they're approaching at it like we should be the middle tier option between these two things. I don't think they think of themselves that way. I don't know what they think though, is the problem. Neff contemplates what the lug to lug is on these watches, and I did not see it in the spec sheet. And so, since it's not in the technical specifications, I'm not sure they're going to have it in the narrative because if they didn't send out a review copy, we're just sort of stuck with whatever they've told us. Yeah, I wonder too. Surely under 50, though. Surely under 50 millimeters. I mean, I say with no knowledge whatsoever, but come on, they can't be. It would be weird to do it that big. So I gotta think in the upper 40s, 45 to 50, but that is a blind guess. So take it for what it's worth, which is nothing. It's worth nothing. Darissa says I should like these a lot more than I do. They are in my lane, but the brand doesn't have any appeal at those price points. It just doesn't resonate with me. Just get a Tudor. Okay. Yeah. No, I could definitely see it. Whereas I've really struggled with a lot of like some of their other ones, like their California dial ones and stuff. To me, they look almost toy-like. So especially at the price point, I struggle. But yeah, when I start thinking about the price point, I mean, everything else becomes that's in that price range is on board. So I'm now already thinking, I'm thinking Tudor, yes. I'm also thinking Oris. Those are probably the first two that really jump out to me. Also, if you're kind of thinking more of a dressy style watch, I think you can start thinking like Omega DeVille line. Yeah, those are more popular in the East than they are here in the US. But there are, I mean, if I'm thinking like this, but not this aesthetic, I think DeVille comes into play. And then I think you're still in that ballpark with Omega too. So definitely something there. Darcy says lug to lug is quite long, a few millimeters longer than you'd expect for the diameter. So maybe it is closer to the, I don't think it's going to be over 50 at a 39.5, but maybe I'm safe with my bet that it's over 45. Neff says, I was afraid of that. 39.5 is about as big as I can go on the watch without rotating bezel. But I'm sure those mail-in links there are over 50. Oh, so you think it's over 50. That's very interesting. Well, what I'm going to do here, as you get to stare at my head, is I'm going to, so you don't get stuck watching me type this stuff, I'm going to try and search and see if we can find it. Nomos Club 39 Neomatik lug to lug. And I know I already misspelled Neomatik because I Americanized it. I'm wrong. And you guys are right. Let's share it. 50.5. It's 0.5 over my guess, my maximum guess. 50.5 millimeters. Okay. Well, I probably wouldn't get it then. I can wear that size, but I don't think I want to with that shape. Let's see. There is a 37 millimeter blue option according to DeRosa, so that would be an option. Neff says, "I hope they do the 37 in the sunburst gray." Yeah, that's the thing. I've definitely seen the blue before, but it just doesn't click for me. Maybe they sunburst it, or I would prefer them doing these fun, what autumnal, as Monochrome called them, watches. There we go. Blow those back up for you guys. Goran says, "I'm with you on Nomos. Most Bauhaus doesn't do it for me. Club Campus on a strap is the one I'd go for if I had to. The long lugs tend to put me off." Yeah, it's for the shape. It's weird. Like, what's the Patrimony, right? The Vacheron Calatrava wannabe style, like their version of this stuff. But they do theirs all really big. Like theirs are all over 40 diameter. The Patrimonies are. So that's like something I expect out of Vacheron doing that approach. Ken says, "I like the gray one best, but the others would look better on bronze or rose gold." Yes. I would like to see, I think especially this dark, I want to call it mocha, this really dark one. I think that would look very good in rose gold. I don't know about this. I don't know if I would like this one as much as I do in rose gold than currently. I always love gray, so I'm by. I had sort of a silver dial sunburst gray watch of my Zodiac, though I had one of the watermelons. It was a little lighter than this, but I really liked the effect quite a bit. Very attractive watch. Neff says, "I looked up the lug to lug on Nomos' site, 49.5 millimeters without the end links." Oof. Yeah. Underhay says, "Whenever I see a Nomos on a strap, there are big gaps between the case and strap. The lugs are too long for no reason." Wow, there's a lot of Nomos hate. Well, it's given us something to talk about, so I like it. Koji says, "The long lugs never bothered me wearing them, but it puts a lot of people off, which I can understand." Yes, apparently. I often don't think enough. I think about the lugs. But yeah, but anytime I've gone to make a buy, I've found out the lug to lug beforehand. So Neff says, "I don't mind the long lugs as long as they fit on my wrist. My khaki mechanical was like that. Is like that. I quite like them with a right strap or a bracelet, but they need to fit." Yeah, when I had my Portuguese, which was a massive watch, it was the biggest lug to lug I ever had. That really pushed it. The Moser with the 43 millimeter diameter, I would have been worried about it, but the lug to lug on it is shorter than my Tudor bronze one was, which was like a 51 point, and that one fit. So, but the Tudor wasn't, and then again, this is on a rubber strap. The Tudor wasn't on a bracelet, so I didn't have any end links to worry about. It came on a leather strap, which I don't really do that with dive watches. So I put it on a NATO, which the NATO didn't fit right because it was 22 millimeter NATO, and Tudor's Black Bay Bronze original style is a 23 millimeter lug width. And it looked okay from a distance, but I could see a gap. I eventually put it on like a silicone band, and that wore pretty well, but it was such a thick watch, I ended up getting rid of it. So that's another thing, is the thick. Now these, as we noted, are thin. They're under 9 millimeters. So that's like my Tudor 1926 size was like that. So yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm all for it as long as the watch doesn't overhang. And the Portuguese was so close. I think that one was around like 52 millimeters. So I could do these. I could pull these off. But I think with this, again, to me, if you were to ask me what is this style, I call it the Calatrava style. I don't even think of it as the now Calatrava has Bauhaus inspiration, obviously, but especially that Calatrava approach with the small seconds, which is my favorite type. I would want this a little, like I'd probably just do the 37, especially as long as these all are according to you all in terms of the lug to lug. I'd probably do the 37 because I kind of think like 37 and a half, 38 and a half. That's kind of that dress watch size I like. Like the Longa one is a 38.5 diameter, but way shorter lug to lug. They have a very different lug profile. But yeah, anyway, it's really interesting. But I wanted to talk about it because Nomos finally came out with a dial design that I actually liked with. But how could they lose with doing gray and sunburst? And they're all these muted earth tones, which apparently I like in this format. So anyway, that's it for the show today. Oh, actually, we went an hour, so that worked out quite well. Again, thank you everyone who was able to tune in live. I do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and please click the like button. I don't know if that. Sure, it must help even after we're done. It must help. I don't know. Does it help? Probably doesn't. Who cares? Who cares if it helps or it doesn't help? And I'll plan to do another live stream next Saturday, like I usually do. Of course, I don't know the topics yet. We'll see what comes out in the news. And otherwise, I think I saw something about a new watch coming out on the 5th. Saw something on Reddit. So Baltic, maybe. I don't normally talk about Baltic. Maybe we'll talk about that on the live stream because I don't know if I would do a pre-produced video for something like that. But anyway, I hope you all have a really good weekend. Enjoy the last day of September. And we'll talk to you all in October. So take care, everybody.